Hey guys, welcome to a new video, and no, as you can see, this time it's not Kerbal Space Program. I recently started trying a new video game. Well, new to me, it is Space Engineers, a game with some mechanics similar to KSP, but not as realistic and with a different theme. From what I have experienced so far, one could say that it is more free and with a universe almost as large as that of Kerbal Space Program, and to be honest, I really liked what I have been discovering along the way, with a sandbox style that offers you total creative freedom in the universe, in a very similar way to how KSP does it. Here, we can build our ships too, in a somewhat different way than we do at KSP. We occupy the role of an engineer, and we work by hand each structural component of the ships and vehicles we build. This is my first contact with Space Engineers, because although I know it has been around for some time, I had never tried it before, nor had I searched for gameplays on the internet about it. However, once I started, I found the huge amount of mechanics it had overwhelming, and although I considered streaming it from the beginning, I decided to take some time before starting to at least learn the basics and not bore you just by going around and tapping random buttons. I just started recording this game now that I feel somewhat ready for it. The last thing I tried was to create a Land Rover, and when I discovered that I couldn't place the wheels in any way due to some design error, I felt frustrated and made the decision to finally start with my first ship. As I gave free rein to my creativity and put aside the tutorials, I began to get more and more inspired and decided that it was time to start recording. I know, this beginning may feel like I skipped a big fragment, but don't worry, you really haven't missed anything. In this custom game we start on an alien planet with a base at our disposal, which seems to have belonged to one of the first colonists. It is a hostile planet, whose atmosphere is not breathable for us, but it is not totally lacking in oxygen. We do not know how we got here, nor how we will get out, but we will have to manage to gain some power, confront the space pirates who circumnavigate the area, and escape this planet once and for all. With the introductions made, let's move on to the gameplay itself. Little by little, our ticket out of this planet was taking shape. However, with my limited experience here, I still had a hard time believing that this thing would really fly when it was finished. As the clock ticked, our reserves were depleting rapidly, there was no uranium left, and our atmospheric vehicles were running out of energy, so we had to finish the ship quickly to be able to escape before we died of asphyxiation here. There was little left in the hydrogen and oxygen reserves. And the nearest ice lake was about a kilometer away, guarded by a pirate refinery that was protected by drones. Our mining ship did not have weapons, and every time we went to get supplies we ran a high risk of being intercepted by a pirate drone. Without weapons to defend ourselves, that would undoubtedly be our end. For now we will resume some routine mining tasks. As you can see, I created a hole large enough for our mining ship to fit in, and be able to extract resources more efficiently. I also closed it with walls to prevent the giant spiders from attacking me while I was doing this work. The purpose is to refine the rock to obtain iron, nickel, and silicon, the fundamental components to build structural blocks for our ships, vehicles, and bases, iron being the main one of these. Nickel and silicon are necessary to make solar panels, energy cells, and glass for our windows. Very carefully, we performed the extraction task multiple times to gather the necessary resources. The base's refineries were able to process these resources quickly, so I didn't need to use mine. However, sometimes I continued doing it so as not to complicate myself using the complex systems of the base, which although they are really simple, at the time I did all this I did not know how to use them properly. Also I have taken the time to build some industrial production structures to develop my research and in the process be able to repair the damaged components of the base. Now, we carry out another mining cycle. After refining the rock, we obtain our metal ingots, which we need for the creation of parts in the industrial assembler. It should be noted that the production speed, the size of the inventory, and the speed of the tools are multiplied by 3, In this way I avoid some of the tediousness of waiting hours and hours for the pieces to be ready and several of the trips that we have to do for take the necessary components. Something to highlight from my first experiences here is that although the jetpack seemed like the most surreal and strange thing I could have, certainly once you get used to it, it doesn't look so bad anymore, and in fact, although it may seem like a joke, I like it. Imagine building all these pieces without a backpack to transport you to reach the key places. It would be impossible outside of multiplayer. And it's not so surreal when you take into account that it is offset from the front, and consumes high amounts of hydrogen, so to a certain extent, I have learned to appreciate it. For now our ship is looking more and more like a ship. We place the frame first, then we place the floor plates, the walls, and finally the roof. Also, little by little, we place some extra supports. Although the blocks that we use as legs are quite resistant on their own, I think there is a possibility that the structure will collapse if we force it too much, so while it is under construction, we must take a minimum of care. This part of the ship will remain open to the void, and the living area will remain in front. However, we reinforced it a little since this will be a kind of cargo module. Here will be the fuel tanks, cargo containers, and various connections to the internal system. Although it is a small ship, the idea is to compact all the necessary survival elements inside, so I can leave this base and explore freely without having to return. This planet is attractive, but after a while, it becomes extremely stressful, and all the time we were harassed by spiders. Not to mention the pirate settlements that wouldn't let us leave here. With this ship, we will finally have a means to confront them. Perhaps it is a mistake to build it almost entirely of light unreinforced blocks, but this is not really intended to be a warship, but rather a mining exploration ship, with some defenses. Something that I would like to ask you, and I may repeat the question more than once, is how long you would like these types of videos to be. I know that at first they can be entertaining, but the construction can become somewhat repetitive, and the more for me, it took me a long time to properly understand how it works. Every time I had to install a window it was hell. So I'm curious. Would you like me to cut out the most repetitive parts like mining or travel, or would you prefer me to make longer videos showing the complete construction periods? Tell me in the comments. For the moment I will keep it balanced. I will cut out some fragments where I have gotten stuck too much. Like this one where I couldn't find a way to place the roof of the ship without losing space. So in order not to bore you and not to be here being silly, I'm going to cut the most tedious fragments like this. After a long time, I finally decided to install a couple of glass windows and close the tie with some reinforced steel plates. At this point I hadn't realized that they required cobalt, that is, metal grates contain cobalt, and I didn't know how difficult it would be to get them if I ran out, and I recycled a bunch of these to recover some of their minerals. I realized this later. Fortunately, the base contained several components reinforced with grids that I was able to recover to place on my ship. For now we repeat the mining cycle with our small atmospheric ship. Although I hate its design, since it seems extremely impractical for digging underground, I damaged it several times and had to load the game because of this. I must admit that without this mining ship it would have been impossible to complete our work here. Obtaining such a large amount of minerals manually using our drill is practically impossible. Therefore we had no alternative. We had to use this mining ship no matter what. In the end I ended up appreciating it because of how useful it was to build our largest ship. Ironies of life. In this mine one of the most tragic things that could happen to us here happened to us. One of the engines was damaged, and we completely lost our level. One of the biggest difficulties of this game is that the camera does not work the same as in KSP. you are always in locked camera, and this makes it much easier to lose track of up and down if you find yourself flying in a cave, space, or even on a ship. We were face up, and we didn't even realize it. It just pushed more and more forward, and I didn't realize why the ship wasn't moving, until I took a second to grab hold of the cabin and noticed the disaster. This was definitely a problem. I couldn't afford to lose the ship, at least not yet. It would never end if I left it there, and the fact that our engine was a total loss, not even leaving the possibility of repairing it, was definitely a problem. Very discouraging. We barely had power, and we had to force the controls and get several scratches on the rocks of the cave in order to right the ship and get out. At least we managed to get out, and seeing that our ship could still fly with 3 engines, we continued forward as we were. In this case I chose to refine the stones in my own basic refinery, because for some reason, I lost several of the silicon bars that were refined by the base. I don't know why this happened to me. I guess the newbie that I am here could have something to do with it. I don't know. You judge. Maybe it was really stupid, but I went around a few times trying not to lose the silica bars, since I only needed a few for the windows and I couldn't pass them up. Once the upper drills were emptied, I placed the ship over the docking port so that the base could finish refining the last remaining stones. Now, after giving it a few seconds, let's get back to work. I really liked, on an aesthetic level, how the windows of the ship looked. Perhaps they were a bit fragile against heavy shots, but I would have put more in if I had had more silica at that time. Here I decided to mine some components by hand, taking into account that the mining ship was damaged. As long as they were small pieces, I preferred to stop using it. If this ship was damaged once again, we would no longer have a way to go look for ice, and our largest ship would be stranded on this planet forever. Besides the fact that we were out of battery. Although it may not seem like that, since we have a huge base, our resources are really very limited. We were running out of hydrogen quickly. I lost a lot of time learning to play that I would now need to recover, and we needed to find a balance between one thing and another. All these trips I took to mine resources were not only due to the fact that the mine was damaged, but also because until its batteries were recharged, we could not use it. Staying without a battery inside the cave, without uranium, and in these conditions, would be disastrous, since there is no uranium nearby, and the only sources are armed pirate drones, which we cannot attack without an operational combat ship. So in order not to waste time, we continued doing it manually for a while. It should be noted that in this game you cannot do time warp like in KSP. This game was created by me, and there are no other players, so I can save and restart without problems. But while I am in the game, time never stops running, and if you need to wait for the batteries to charge, you cannot skip time. You must enter a stasis chamber so that your character consumes less oxygen, and wait calmly doing something else outside of the game. Strangely, I like these features, as I find that they make the game much more immersive and realistic, although realism is not necessarily the purpose of this game, but its mechanics still seem like genius to me. I made approximately 4 or 5 trips with the hand drill. It doesn't make much sense to give too many, because with a single trip of the mining ship we obtained the equivalent of more than 20 trips with our loaded backpack, so it was almost better to observe the design to continue planning the details. In the case of survival mode, I think symmetry is not available. Therefore, when designing a ship without plans, you must be very careful so that it has a good appearance. It should be noted that symmetry is not so important in this game. It is more important to have a few gyroscopes that generate good torque to orient the ship, but even so, my Kerbal mentality did not allow me to use this to violate the laws of physics. If you do something, you have to do it well. As time goes by we get closer to one of my favorite parts, placing the pilot seat. It is my favorite part because we will finally have a command module for our ship, and we will be able to imagine how it would be handled. Of course, there is still a long way to go, but it is still very pleasant to sit in the control seat. I know, I'm like a child when it comes to these things. You don't need to tell me. Okay, how could we place it? To be frank, I was disappointed that the ship didn't have a center line to reference. Noob stuff. So we couldn't put it in the center, so I said screw it and placed the seat on the left side as if it is a car. I will reserve the right side for some additional control panel, a shortcut, or something. We'll see. After a long indecision, I put in the frame, and now the priority is to get the parts for the seat. Once again, another mining trip. The mining ship was already loaded so we could use it one more time. From this point I began to make the trips with much greater care, almost paranoia, because another damage to one of the engines would be catastrophic, so with a lot of patience, we filled our mineral reserves again. These cycles could be really exhausting and repetitive for some, but guys, I'm not going to lie, the idea of creating a ship this way, I enjoyed every damn second. After placing the seat and fooling around a little in the cabin of the ship, the next thing was the solar panels. At this point I made a decision. After spending a lot of time building this ship by hand, I realized that the mining ship would be the first to lose its usefulness completely in this job. I would no longer need it, so I went to look for it to start recycling its parts for the components of our spaceship. This would save us a lot of time when we had to build the internal motors, panels, and industrial production modules. For now all I did was pilot it to the nearest platform, so I could extract the components without spending a lot of jetpack hydrogen, which was becoming an increasingly serious concern, since I had already used up a large part of the base's reserves. Fortunately, this was already docked to the base, unlike the Warfighter, which I left disassembled from the docking port, and when the uranium ran out it stopped working. I couldn't really get that ship back, so I ended up recycling it later. For now let's get to what concerns us, the solar panels. For this I didn't have to extract minerals from the ship. I already had all the necessary components in the base's warehouses, so all I had to do was assemble them. Although I ran into indecision here, in the end I settled for putting only 2 panels. Maybe I could have optimized it for 4, but I liked how the 2 looked on the ceiling, and I left the corners to put something else later. On this at the moment I was thinking of using them for turrets, but in the end I would end up using them for something else. In any case, placing solar panels that came out of the structure or on the wings would leave them exposed to enemy fire, so I thought that the less I put in, the easier it would be to maneuver in combat. These construction stages are quite repetitive. You will think that I went around unnecessarily 1,000 times, to which I will respond that you are probably right. But the thing is that I don't use the construction planner much, since I usually accumulate several plans that I forget to remove, and then when I add a new one, the character tries to remove the components for the construction of all of them, including modules that are already built, or cancelled, so I almost prefer to learn the components by heart and bring them on my own. Furthermore, it is not that it is a very complex construction. The worst thing of all is that even if I could memorize the components necessary for its construction, there was no way for me to remember where I kept them. Geez, I'm too young to have Alzheimer's. I hope it's nothing serious. Anyway, after making hundreds of trips, breaking my ankle jumping off the ship, burning myself 3 times with the welder and grinding my boot with the handsaw, I think I can enjoy my solar panels. At least we will have electricity in our interior batteries and a little guaranteed light to work. For now we are reaching 20 minutes of play, not counting the cuts. So I'll leave this video here and bring you the conclusion of our ship in the next few days. Before saying goodbye with an exterior view of the ship, I would like to ask you what you think of Space Engineers as a game. If you like what you see and if you think it would be on par with Kerbal Space Program, let me know in the comments. With this I say goodbye guys. Don't worry, I will try to get through these parts quickly to start the action as soon as possible. If you made it this far, I thank you very much, and I hope to see you in the next video.